Should I adopt someone of my own ethnicity, or should I adopt someone from a different ethnicity, creating a blended multicultural family? That makes sense, right? And whew, boy, do I have a lot to say about this one. Hello, hi, welcome back, lovely friends. Thank you for joining me today. If you are new to my channel and you clicked on this video, I appreciate you so much. And just want to let you know that you're not on here by mistake. You are here on purpose with a lovely purpose, and that is to know if you should adopt in today's society in the year 2024. And from my opinion, absolutely yes. Coming from an adoptee herself, words can't describe how much my family, my adoptive family, truly means to me and how much they've done and they've given me. Like, they are the complete reason of who I am today and why I am here today. Because it's crazy to think that I would have never had this opportunity of life if it wasn't for them. So for me, being an adoptee, and have been with them since my 6 months old all the way till I was 18 years old, like literally my entire life, I have learned so much and have taken away so many different values and have a different, beautiful but different perspective on life. And especially when it comes to family values and how you view the world and your confidence and your character building skills. And so I just hope that my insight, the information that I'm about to share with you, just shows a little bit of positivity and light and give you a more comfortable and more confident way of thinking on your own journey to wanting to adopt someone of your own. And so I think, first of all, let me just preface by saying, I'm gonna give you a round of applause because I think it takes a very special heart for someone to say, I want to adopt a child. And not a lot of people have that heart. And I know adoption comes with a lot of negative stigmas and negative things, and there's a lot of worry, and I know it's not the most popular thing to do. And so when someone really, and I've had a few friends and friends of friends since living in California and LA have mentioned, like, hey, my friend is, considering adopting, or I myself am considering adopting. And they've had all these wonderful, great questions for me. And I never thought once to be like, hey, let me just take all these wonderful questions and also based off my personal experience and kind of give you guys my thoughts, my honest, truest, rawest thoughts when it comes to adoption. So what I'm about to talk about is that if you are interested in adopting in today's society, these are a few important things and questions you might want to ask yourself before making such an amazing but also drastic decision. All right, number one. The first question that I think you should seriously ask yourself, or any other question that you might have in your mind, is, are you seriously in it for the right reasons? Now, you're probably like, Molly, isn't this question a little bit too obvious? Shouldn't you know the answer to it? And honestly, you'd be surprised. And I really think you should take time to truly analyze your situation and your heart and everything first, and ask yourself, are you really in it for the right reasons? If you're a woman and you have an underlying health condition where potentially being pregnant can put your own body and health at risk, at a very high risk, and you still have that desire to want to start a family and have children of your own, say no more. I 1000% support you and wanting to adopt a child. And this is my reasoning behind it, is because whatever you do in life, whatever you accomplish, whatever job, whoever you meet, nothing will ever replace the desire or the want of wanting to start a family of your own or having a child of your own. I can honestly say, you don't know true love until you know the love of a mother or a father. And I think that is so sweet. And it just makes you realize that It doesn't matter what you do in life and what you're accomplishing or your job is, but if you don't have that purpose, that reason of why you're doing life, then it can be a really kind of lonely world and you can get lost in that. So if there's a situation at any point, at any time with anybody where it's like your health versus having a child of your own, say no more. I totally support your decision on wanting to adopt a child, okay? Now, with that being said, adopting a child, you can't take it lightly. Like, it's not like adopting a kitten or a puppy or rescuing an animal from an animal shelter, okay? Like, this decision comes with a very, very lifelong, lasting, heavy responsibilities. And what I mean by that is one day, this little child that you've adopted is gonna grow up. And when they grow up, they're going to become more aware of, wow, this is really not my biological family. And it's gonna be up to you, the parent, if you want to decide to share this information with them, tell them the truth about their life, tell them how you decided to come to this decision on wanting to adopt a baby, and that is all up to you, But for me, my parents in my situation, they were very honest and upfront about me being adopted from the very get-go. And I think that is something that I always appreciate them for, because not only were they honest about it, but they were very, very supportive. And it really kind of started this positive dynamic between us of you can really trust these individuals, because it is a hard kind of realization for any child to want to know or have about themselves, especially at such a young age when you're learning so much about yourself and just trying to figure out yourself and who you are already. And so, yeah, I think that's why I ask that question and why I bring it up as one of probably the most important questions is, are you in it for the right reasons? Because if you're not, and you're still kind of wishy-washy and you're unsure about it, and you do go forward with this whole process, at the end it can be very detrimental to this young person, because they're going to have serious questions one day, and what you do is really going to set the tone in their entire life and how they perceive life and how they perceive other people. And so, yeah, that is a very important question that I think you should ask yourself above all else. I mean, let's be honest. You can't hide the fact that you have an Asian baby with a white dad and a Mexican mom. I mean, that's just scientifically, biologically, like, there's just no way that they could even not want to tell me the truth. So I think in my parents' position, they had no choice but to tell me the truth. But at the same time, my parents, they really believed that the Lord had led them to do this decision, and also having the Lord on their side and them telling me, hey, you're adopted, we're not your real parents, but God set us to be your parents here on this earth, and we're gonna love you so much, just like if we had our own, which a year later, they did have their own. I have a little brother who's theirs. And knowing that, I think that gave me more respect and love and appreciation for them, because it's not easy to come out and just say these things. And not only just say these things, but truly stand by it and live by it. And so, yeah, I think one day that you want to have complete honesty and transparency with the children that you decide to adopt, because that can really, really either make or break it for you in your relationship with your adopted child. Okay, so question number 2. Should I choose to adopt someone within the United States or someone outside of the United States from a different country? And I will say this, I obviously am adopted in China, made in China, literally made in China. But I will say, the older I get and the more that I see how the progression that society has gone in and going through, and just being aware of everything, I just feel like there are so many kids and so many children in the United States that need a loving, supportive family unit. You know, I feel like in America, it's kind of sad, but the more we go on through our lives, and definitely in the 21st century, the family unit is not as important as it was back in the 90s. And so with that being said, I feel like there is a lot of people who are still obviously having children, and those children are growing up in a very, very difficult time and really kind of confused about not only maybe their household and their parents and whatever it is, but really about themselves. And then it really reflects in their self-esteem and who they become as a young individual and a young adult. And so I'm not saying that, you know, you have to adopt in the United States, but I'm just saying that I think we shouldn't overlook the kids and the children that we have here, because they're our future and they're a big reason and a big part of society that we have to depend on for generations to come. And I really hope that made sense and it didn't come off and in a way that was offensive to anybody, because I'm not trying to be at all. Like, I think it's beautiful if you have the heart to want to adopt out of the country, but there's a lot of aspects that is involved with that, like financially and having attorneys involved and having just the time and the resources to go out of the country. And when I was adopted, it was back in the 90s where people in America weren't adopting people from China. Like, this was a very one-off situation where China was in a crisis, okay? They were having a population control, they were having way too many babies, and they pretty much were just okay? They pretty much were just these babies or abandoning these babies, and they pretty much said there's way too many to count, that we need help from the Westerners, okay? And if they want to have the opportunity and the heart to adopt these kids and try to get them out of the country here, then so be it. We're gonna let it happen. And so fortunately and unfortunately, like, that's kind of what was my situation. And so I think it is a huge miracle that it is not by mistake. It is, I believe it was all purposely planned and orchestrated by God. And that's also why I believe in God so much, because I just feel like if I was in China, I would not have a life. I would definitely not be here. And so for me and my situation, when my parents wanted to adopt out of the country, I don't think it was something that they even thought or wanted to do. Like, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's an interview. I'm gonna put that video, I'm just gonna stop talking, and I'm gonna put that video down below in like the bottom, and it's gonna explain to you the story and the chronicles of how everything happened, how my parents came, you know, to this opportunity to adopt me. And I'll just say, they did not plan this. It was all by a surprise, and it was all very last minute. Like, they were pretty much called and said, hey, there's this extra Chinese baby who needs a family, a loving home, and the person who was initially going to adopt this baby backed out. She thought that she was just like a dud, like a bad egg, not gonna, you know, make it back to the United States. And we just wanted to see if you guys wanted to take a chance on her. And within a week, my parents had a baby. And so yeah, that video and everything, I'm gonna link it down below because it's just so amazing. And so their story is truly inspiring on how they came about to making the decision to wanting to adopt me. I think it's totally up to you. Like, if you have the desire and the resources and the help and the support to adopt a baby from out of the country, then explore it, you know? But if you don't, there's so many resources and so many babies and so many young ones here in America that really truly need a loving family as well. Alrighty, so question number 3. Should I adopt someone of my own ethnicity, or should I adopt someone from a different ethnicity, creating a blended multicultural family? That makes sense, right? And whew, boy, do I have a lot to say about this one, because if you are new here, then let me just preface to you, I am Chinese, my dad is white, and my mom is Mexican. So we are a very, very blended, melting pot, multicultural family. And let me tell you, let me start off by saying is that I absolutely loved my upbringing. I think it is so unique, it is so different, and I have learned to have so much respect and knowledge about different, cultures. I mean, I grew up with my grandma who is Mexican. She pretty much taught me how to speak Spanish. So, cuando yo soy chiquita, ella me enseñar cómo hablar español. And my dad, who was like super white, like West Texas, like yeehaw white, okay? Like they're very traditional Bible Belt, oil field, cotton field, like yeah, they're the yeehaws. Like that's literally what I'm trying to say. But so me growing up in that and being completely Asian was so different. It was so unique. Like I was the only Asian. And literally growing up, because at the time in Texas, back in the 90s, and definitely in my high school years and like the early 2000s, there was not a lot of Asians, okay? So I was sticking out like a sore thumb, but I was what you call a Twinkie, okay? I was yellow on the outside, but very, very white on the inside. And so that's all I knew. I mean, all my friends were white, and I loved Mexican food, and I loved American food, and I honestly had not really had the opportunity to have authentic Chinese food until I was about 18, young adult, 20 years old, and I moved to LA and had the opportunity. But I want to say creating a blended family definitely comes with its pros and cons. I'm not saying do it, and I'm not saying don't do it, because in my situation and my personal experience, it worked fabulously. It really did. And I loved that I was able to explore these different ethnicities and religions and cultures and all that good stuff, all the different food, all that good stuff. But I will say, like I said, it has pros and cons. But I do want to say, growing up, because I had the lack of understanding of my own ethnicity, I really grew up very naive towards a lot of Chinese and Asian things. I just really did, and so when I became a young adult and my parents gave me the opportunity, they allowed me the opportunity to move to California and pursue my music and my acting and everything I wanted to do in California, it was a culture shock. And not only was it a very big culture shock, but it was also like I went through a little bit of an identity crisis. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, wow, this is what Asian people look like, and like smart, cute, attractive Asian people, like not only the ones that they depicted back in Hollywood back in the day, okay, where the non-desirable, they're just the book kids, the whiz kids, the highly unattractive, not sought after, very awkward, like that's the mind that I had about all Asians. And I told myself I would never date an Asian. I was like always dating white boys, and the Lord taught me. He was just like, Molly, he's like, you are going to be in for a surprise, because little did I know, 10, 15 years later, after saying those harsh things about my own kind, I never would have thought that I would have married a full Asian and had a full Asian baby myself. So the Lord has just really humbled me and taught me a lot about myself and my heritage and my own background. And I think this is still so fresh and still so sensitive to myself, but I also never even wanted to grow up visiting China and Asia. And knowing that they had such a strict one-child policy, knowing what the government did towards mothers and families who had more than one family, I was honestly quite disgusted, and I was honestly saddened by the fact that they could ever allow or ever force someone to do this. So I grew up with a very, very strong dislike towards my own kind. And that was very interesting, because I'm not saying my parents said one thing or another. It was nothing of what my parents said. It was me as a young child and being immature and also still trying to figure herself out, but trying to understand how anybody could do that to their own people. And so for me, it was very difficult for me to separate the communistic government that China had for its people and the people themselves, if that makes sense. And so I was always like, I grow up and I'll never want to go to China. I'll never want to go to Asia. I'll never want to support anything Chinese, because how in the world can someone do this to their own kind? And that to me was just like beyond comprehension as a 14, 12, 10-year-old girl when you're trying to, learn about yourself. And I think I truly realized these thoughts when I was in 7th grade. And at the time, my parents had always put me in a private Christian school. And I always was like, okay, like, why don't I just go to public school? Why don't I just, go to normal kid school? But I see why they did that, because having those godly principles and having that, having those godly principles growing up really did help me with my upbringing, because I would go to these church camps and I would hear all these stories about kids, and they would, they had an opportunity to step up and talk about things that they were dealing with and things that they wanted prayer for and things that they're trying to figure out in themselves. And a lot of these kids, they're all white. A lot of these kids were talking about issues that they had at home, and fighting with their sibling, or not getting along with their mom, or not understanding their dad, or their parents, having arguments, and it's really affecting the child themselves. And I remember just really standing up and talking about how struggling with the fact that simply, like, I would go home and not even look like my own family. And I knew they loved me. I knew that they would treat me and treated me the exact same as they would my little brother and all of these things. But as a young 7th grader, you still try, you have a lot of these emotions, and you're just like, why don't I look like my parents? Why don't I look like anybody who's around me? And so for me, it was a very, very challenging time growing up as a young kid, because then I always had these thoughts about me being adopted and me being different, and I was really sad. I was like, I'm so different. I'm so, like, everything about me is just made up. Everything about me, I just feel so lonely. I just felt so out of place and awkward. And so for me, being in a blended family, I think that's the one thing that I grew up having these feelings that I definitely knew that normal kids didn't have. And I know in today's society it's completely different. There are very, very different standards in today's society, and there are definitely lots of blended families out there and all inclusivity and all of this stuff. So that's why I think there's pros and cons to it, and take it for a grain of salt. But at the end of the day, if you decide to adopt a baby or a child that is outside of your own ethnicity, I just want to give advice to you to not neglect and forget the fact that that baby, that adopted child, still has its own heritage and its own roots, and don't forget to teach that child about it. Because if you don't, and you just kind of just ignore it, or they just have the lack of resources to share with them that just, this is, where you came from and blah, blah, blah this, blah, blah, blah that. I feel like I would have had a little bit different of a perspective growing up, because as a young adult, and I'm not even gonna lie, even nowadays, the way that I grew up having this mentality towards the Asian culture myself, I have really had to learn to catch myself and be like, hey Molly, like, you think this way because you grew up a certain way, but to them this is normal, or to them this is okay. And so for me, I just have had to do a lot of soul searching, character building, and rewiring my brain to think and realize that there's so much more to learn about the Asian culture than what I was given when I was younger. Because, let's be honest, back in the day, like, my idea of Chinese food was Panda Express. So yeah, those are my thoughts about wanting to blend a very multicultural, diverse family. I think it is such a beautiful thing to want to have that opportunity to do if you want to do that. But also don't forget that it comes with a different set of expectations and responsibilities and a little bit of hurdles to have to jump through in order to make this child feel completely normal and safe and precious. Because at the end of the day, you do have to remember, you're bringing in a child into your environment and you want that environment to be their safe place. And that is also very important, that they probably are coming from a very traumatic experience and you don't want to put them in another traumatic experience. So that's also very important. Question number 4. Should I choose to have a closed adoption or an open adoption? And pretty much these are the difference between the two. Having a closed adoption is where it's done in private, and when it comes to this child growing up and everything, and once you adopt that child is not going to have any contact with its former biological family at all. Like, they just don't want to have any contact. That's just like a zero tolerance contact law. If you're gonna have an open adoption, then you're giving that biological family the rights and the agreement to be like, hey, you have the opportunity to still be a part of this child's life, to come visit them, check up on them, call them, write them, email them, whatever arrangement that family may have between the two. And for me, in my personal opinion, I did not have the option to have a closed adoption or an open adoption because my parents abandoned me. And it's not like I came with papers, you know, they literally like, here's a box, here's a baby, throw them in there and we'll see what happens. But in today's society, I know it's very, having a closed and an open adoption can really, really set some different boundaries and hurdles and responsibilities for people who are wanting to adopt nowadays. So, this is my 2 cents about that. If you opt in to have a closed adoption, I just think that you should be prepared for the multitude of questions your adoptive child may have in the future. And if you're not willing to answer all those questions, or at least do the best that you can for them, that's going to be really hard on the child. To not know anything about their biological family, to not have any sort of questions answered, or a photo, or a name to face, or if that child, it's gonna happen. Because, I mean, I love my family to death, and I would never replace them under any circumstances. I would never want another adoptive family, but at the end of the day, nothing will ever replace the want and the desire of wanting to know the unknown. And when you take that away from a child, especially about their own story, that's where the waters get really like muddy and iffy, and you never want to have your adoptive child grow up and have resentment towards you. And so that might be a little too deep, a little too serious, but with my personal experience and the way that I feel about not knowing my biological family, I kind of feel like that kind of coincides with one another. You know what I mean? And so yeah, you just have to be prepared with all the questions that this young child might have in the near future about their own biological family, and they're gonna have every right to be curious about the unknown. Now, if you choose to have an open adoption, I think that is a beautiful thing, because not only are you willing to work with that family, but I think you're also telling that child, that adoptive child, that hey, we decided to adopt you, but we also are so truthful and want to be so transparent in telling you the truth that we are not your biological family, but that we still do appreciate and value your biological mother or father. And that's also very, very, that's a very heroic move, if you could say, right? Because I know once you have your child, you want to raise your child the way you want to, and the way everything is like in your control, right? Like what you want to do, what you don't want to do. But at the end of the day, having that acknowledgement and realizing that you would have never had this child if it wasn't for the biological family, that right there, I think is the difference. Is like you were given this baby as a gift as well, you know, because you needed them, but as much as they needed you, right? But at the end of the day, I think it's super important for this little child who's still learning and wanting to know more about themselves. I think if they want to have the opportunity to know their biological parents, I think it's very much so something that is necessary in order for them to accept the fact that they're adopted, and then also grow and become mature in that, and then also have a different set of, like, it's a different perspective for them. You know, I would, you know, now I guess me being in my late 20s, I would like to know a little bit about my biological family. So, and in my case, it's a little bit hard, a little bit impossible. But if you have that opportunity, yeah, by so means, like, it's beautiful to see families support each other and be there for each other, but also be very truthful and honest and transparent with one another. Okay, so here is the 5th and final question that you should ask yourself before wanting to adopt. How are you going to deal with the questions, comments, and opinions of others once you've adopted that child? And sometimes they're gonna come from friends, family members, peers that you may not even know, like random people out in the street. And so, yeah, in a world that we live in today, which is a very observational but judgmental world, it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. And so you have to really have thick skin and not care what others think about you or your own family or your want and desire to wanting to adopt a child. Like, first of all, it's none of their business, right? And second of all, you want that child that you've adopted not to feel like an outsider, not to feel like they're less than or not good enough for your family. So I think that's why I bring this point up. It's still very important that you preserve and that you protect the energy that you have created around your own family. And so for me and my situation, I remember back in the 90s when adoption like wasn't even a thing, especially adopting kids from China, that like you never even saw that in America at that time. And so my family, my parents, they dealt with a lot of criticism and a lot of negative responses of like, how could you ever do something like that? Why would you ever adopt a child from China? How could you, you know, like, maybe this question isn't necessarily for me, like, as in like, I can't answer this in a very positive or the correct way, but I think it's still very important because, like I said, like, you're in charge of creating the environment and the atmosphere and protecting that energy that you want to have for your own family. And so I guess the best way to combat it is like, you just kill them with kindness. You know, they don't know your situation. They don't know why you chose to adopt. They have no idea about your child and your love that you have for them and the heart that you have for them. And in my opinion, those who choose to adopt families and choose to have, like, especially a blended family, my God, your heart, bless your soul, is more precious than I think anybody else around, because you understand that love is beyond boundaries, right? And being a parent is beyond just a biological thing. Like, I think it all needs to come back on you and how you view your family and what you're teaching and instilling in this child, because I think that's what we lack in today's society is love and true compassion and knowing that we're all truly connected one way or another. It doesn't matter what ethnicity you are. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter what religious view you have. I think it's beautiful when you have a blended family in those ways. And so the negative comments and the opinions of others, you're always going to have opinions of people, and people are always going to have opinions about you. And I think, I'm trying to learn this day by day, you know, as a young adult now, but you just have to not let it get to you and just remember that your sole purpose in adopting a child is not for the gratification of others and not for them to view it as a charity act or anything like that. It is because you desperately desire to have a child and a family of your own. And if you just remember that, and that important thing, that one thing that nothing can replace, a family unit, I think that alone can combat any negativity, any opinions, any questions, any whatever that people may have about adopting, because adopting is beautiful. And I think it's something that people don't take as seriously as they should if they want to do it. And I can honestly say, like, I love being adopted, and it's taken me 20-something years to be proud of where I've come from and how I was raised and how I was brought into this world, because it is different, it is unique, and it did take a lot of work to get to where I'm at mentally and with confidence, right? And I'm not saying I'm there yet. I have still a lot of work to do, but I will say that I am more appreciative of my adoptive family more than ever, especially after having a young daughter of my own, because I would have never had the opportunity to meet my first blood, my firstborn, my first everything if it wasn't for my own adoptive family. Whew. Okay, so I know that was like a ton of information, but if you made it this far in this video, I appreciate you so much, and I thank you for giving your time to sit here and listen to me rant about adoption. And from my perspective, I hope that if any of the questions that you had were answered by me today, I hope that you got a really true, genuine, honest answer from an adoptee herself and her perspective, that it helped you, and it helps you come to terms with your own decision that you want to make. So I just appreciate you guys for being so kind and taking the time just to listen to me and be on this new journey with me as a new mom, as an adoptee, as someone who's just learning to love life and take it one day at a time. So until next time, I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.